My partner and I have been married for almost 8 years, and we've been together for about 13 years. Our story began when I started dating her during her first year of grad school. I was completely attracted to her, no doubt about it. Interestingly, we were quite different. I'm introverted, outspoken, straightforward, and not exactly a charmer. On the other hand, she's very outgoing, easily influenced by others' opinions, and has a lot of energy. Initially, I didn't think she was shallow or fixated on others' opinions, but my perspective has changed over time. Early in our relationship, I found out that my future wife had a wild past. Many of her friends were people she had been physically close to, and she had a history of making out with almost every male friend she had. At that time, I thought, well, she's a young woman in college, so this is probably normal behavior. I never considered myself the jealous type and hadn't really experienced jealousy before. But that would change dramatically. In the first week of our relationship, she asked me not to call or visit her because her close friend Paul was coming to town and staying at her place. She wanted some alone time with someone she could relate to. I tried not to overthink it. Just because he was a guy didn't necessarily mean anything, right? However, this memory stuck with me because I would encounter Paul frequently, and I learned that my future wife, whom I'll call Camilla, had a romantic past with him. Moreover, their interactions in front of me were often intriguing. Camilla's stories were inconsistent, making it difficult to piece together the whole picture. According to her, she and Paul had mutual crushes while she was dating her first boyfriend. She claims to have had many partners, but only one boyfriend. The timeline of this relationship varies depending on her account. Sometimes she says they dated from her junior year of high school until her sophomore year of college, while other times she says they broke up during her freshman year of college. She has mentioned that she used him, the boyfriend, after they split, and their relationship was on and off. She also said that she and Paul acted like a couple at one point, but then he slept with one of her friends, although later she admitted that she had betrayed him first. I suspect she might have been involved with Paul while her boyfriend thought they were still together. I'm sharing this because I wonder if this pattern of behavior has repeated itself in our relationship. During the first 2 years of our dating, we went to bars quite often. Camilla was a self-proclaimed flirt and would often flirt with others, even in front of me. Not only did she flirt openly, but she also discussed her past experiences with former partners in great detail, often with me present. Besides Paul, she had an ongoing friends with benefits relationship with a guy I'll call James. As it turns out, James is genuinely a good person, and we're still friends today. However, back then, I couldn't stand him. He would regularly talk about his close moments with Camilla, even in front of both of us. It's tough to hear someone from your partner's past describe details. During those initial couple of years, several things bothered me. I'd often see her deeply engaged in conversation with someone new, not even bothering to greet me. She'd frequently find herself surrounded by a group of guys, making it impossible for me to chat with her for hours on end. Whenever Paul was around, he'd always sit as close to her as possible, and they'd be practically glued together. As he played video games, she'd serve him a bowl of MJ, even lighting it for him. She'd constantly interrupt me to pay attention to Paul's words. For a while, Paul was involved with our downstairs neighbor, but he'd always make a point to visit Camilla first. Once, her best friend came to see her, and she didn't want me around so she could have some one-on-one time with her friend, a female schoolmate. However, she ended up inviting her close buddy Michael and 4 other people. She repeated this on a night that was meant to be just for the girls. I wasn't allowed to call or drop by, yet she invited 4 guys, excluding me, to join their girls' night. I tried my best to let these things slide, but they became increasingly difficult to overlook. My anxiety and insecurity grew. I want to mention that I have a daughter, and I see her every other weekend. I went through a period of unemployment when finding a job was tough, and I fell behind on child support payments due to a recession. During this time, Camilla was interning, and I tried to stay in touch with her. Sadly, she seemed uninterested when I called, often chatting with her friends. One incident that really affected me was when I had to go to court for falling behind on payments. I narrowly avoided jail by making a deal with my daughter's mother. I had just gotten a job and needed 2 weeks to gather over $2,000, so I was stressed and had to borrow money. When I called Camilla for support, she was not only disinterested, but also busy eating Chipotle and chatting with her friends. There was no concern or empathy. A few weeks later, she went on a trip to an amusement park with her internship colleagues. Once again, she didn't want me to join, but I found out that others brought their partners. As I mentioned, these things add up and become hard to forget. She even attended a Christmas party with Paul, where she admitted he was flirting with her. Fast forward a year, she moves back home and we talked about moving in together. I received a small inheritance, allowing us to find a place, and I secured a job in her area. Finally, after almost 2.5 years of ignoring her thoughtless behavior, I confronted her about how much her flirting upset me. She recounted an incident at a local bar in my absence. In her narrative, she informed the bartender that she would consider getting involved if she were single. My discomfort was evident when I responded to her tale. In reaction, she erupted in anger, vehemently denying ever making such a statement, despite having just recounted it to me. It dawned on me that Camilla struggled to cope with criticism of her character and would react with intense fury when challenged. Simultaneously, Paul sent her a late-night text that I happened to observe, which read, "When do I get to see that fine backside again?" As time passed, things improved. We formed a tight-knit group of friends, and my daughter and Camilla grew closer. We had very few arguments, and everything was fantastic. Our circle of friends fell apart after about 3 years, but Camilla and I got engaged. Things remained pretty good between me, Camilla, my daughter, and our friendship with Carl and Lola. A few years later, we got married, with Carl officiating the ceremony. Another year passed, and things took a dark turn. Lola discovered Carl's infidelity, leading to their divorce. Naturally, Lola sought comfort from Camilla, but then came an unexpected twist. Lola embraced her midlife crisis, going out to bars and pursuing men like there was no tomorrow. The odd thing was that she insisted on taking my wife with her almost every other night as her wingwoman. During this period, my job required me to work long hours, sometimes from 3 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 to 4 times a week. While I was at work, my wife was out socializing with guys. Her interest in being close with me was at an all-time low. She often claimed it was because she was tired, but she had plenty of energy for going out. On a certain occasion, she shared an incident where a bouncer flirted with her, and a bartender, encouraging the interaction, remarked that she must be there looking for something. During this event, I noticed her friendly connection with the bartender, whom we'll call Bob, on a visit to the bar together. On the night of her birthday celebration at the venue, she initiated a tight hug with him, almost leaping in his direction. Despite her later claim that he had hugged her, her high level of intoxication that night led to her falling flat on her face before reaching the bar. I, on the other hand, remained relatively sober throughout the evening. When I discussed this incident with one of Camilla's friends and simply mentioned Camilla and Bob, the friend had an emotional outburst, which seemed particularly suspicious to me. Later, an individual acquainted with my wife, who had hosted a party she attended, unexpectedly showed up at my workplace. Upon learning my address, he asked if I knew Camilla and her boyfriend Bob. Although it could be attributed to a possible mistake, the coincidence did not escape my notice. Moreover, there was a prevailing joke at the bar insinuating that Bob might be lacking in one aspect, but compensated in others. Later, Camilla confided in me about her dissatisfaction with a partner who was not well endowed, recounting a previous encounter with a man who was small, but good at other things. While I recognize the potential for overthinking, a sense of uncertainty continues to persist in my thoughts. During this time, another strange thing happened. Camilla and I had absolutely no physical contact for 2 months. Closeness had been an issue for years, but we still had occasional moments of closeness. During this period, there was nothing. Strangely, Camilla missed her period for a month and feared she might be pregnant. I couldn't help but wonder why she thought that was possible if she was only sleeping with me. When I brought it up, Camilla predictably lost her temper. After this, she started taking birth control, but our bed life remained stagnant. Around this time, we attended a family wedding. I remember that after the wedding, she was tipsy and began talking about going dipping in the hotel pool. My dad and brothers went to bed, and so did I. I had been awake for at least 24 hours due to work. She ended up going with my cousin's husband while I lay down. I woke up 2 hours later, and she wasn't there. She was back by morning, but she claimed they didn't go dipping and that she returned right away, which I know isn't true. Later, Camilla went to Lola's house for a pool day, taking my daughter with her. One of our acquaintances, let's call him Keith, was there. Camilla told me that Keith and Lola were quite drunk, and Keith flirted with her in front of my daughter. When I mentioned this later, Camilla got upset because she was worried I would anger Lola and others who were there. It was then that I realized my wife cared more about the opinions of her social circle than mine. Eventually, the frequent outings, including on my days off without me, stopped when Lola met someone new and remarried. After that, Camilla hardly ever heard from Lola. To be completely honest, I began emotionally distancing myself and even trying to numb myself to the idea of my wife being with someone else. I even tried to make myself indifferent to closeness. All of this was causing me anxiety. I started having panic attacks, which she began to notice. The distancing, not the panic attacks. I told her about one I had while at her cousin's place during a Super Bowl party break. I had another one at my previous job, which resulted in me being sent to the hospital with extremely high blood pressure. I blacked out. Fast forward to the recent past, from 2020 until now. A lot has happened. I lost my job, went on unemployment, had my unemployment revoked, putting me in debt. I was accused of endangering someone at work, went to court, and ended up on probation. I spiraled into depression and anxiety, feeling paralyzed. I didn't even want to leave the house. I became short-tempered and unmotivated all during the pandemic. Meanwhile, Camilla started a new career and, being the extrovert she is, struggled with being cooped up indoors. Before the pandemic escalated, Camilla traveled to Florida for work training. One night, she visited a Caribbean club and was chased by one of the guests. Oddly, the chef came out to tell her how stunning she was. I found this strange because if the chef was in the back, how would he know to come out and compliment a random person's appearance? Maybe I'm overthinking it. Anyway, she called me once that night saying, "These guys are really making me want to smoke MJ." She called again, supposedly on her way home, when an unfamiliar voice started yelling into the phone. It was so loud that the person must have had their mouth right next to the receiver. She called back and told me it was the guy who pursued her. He was an Uber driver and had pulled over across the street to offer her a ride. That's what she told me while intoxicated. Sober, she claimed she bumped into him in person as she left the club, but that night, she said she was already outside, walking home. Both of us started therapy. As her departure approached, Camilla consistently stayed at work later. She attributed it to her workload, yet she had no problem leaving on time for social events like dinners, ball games, and other outings. I once went with her to a friend's house from work, remaining sober throughout. At one point, they became close, holding hands and gazing into each other's eyes. I'm sure of what I saw. This friend was a female co-worker who already had a boyfriend. Camilla began dedicating more time to working out and enhancing her appearance. She started coming home progressively later. I worked the 1 a.m. to 10 a.m. shift, and she often arrived home when I had only 4 to 5 hours left. One day she attended a 5-hour book club when we hadn't seen each other, returning just when I needed to sleep. Any attempt to discuss it resulted in anger and yelling. When I vented, I faced criticism and harsh scolding, while she expected me to just listen, which I mostly did. However, there were times when my frustration boiled over and I snapped. Never physically, I would never damage her. The only topics she seemed interested in discussing were her fitness goals and her job. Her increasing criticism made me more silent and frustrated. All the frustration came to a head in a single incident. 2 years earlier, I became my daughter's primary guardian as her mom moved to Texas. Well, her mother waited until the last minute to book a flight, and the only days that didn't conflict with our work schedules were on weekends, particularly her schedule. Apparently, my daughter's mother couldn't find a direct weekend flight. Camilla found out about this and decided to contact her. Honestly, I didn't think it was our responsibility to arrange the flight. In fact, the custody agreement states that she's responsible for scheduling and covering travel expenses to and from Texas. Camilla didn't inform me about my daughter's mother's difficulty finding a weekend flight, or that she had reached out. Camilla also took it upon herself to agree on a midweek time to take my daughter to the airport. What she did tell me was that my daughter's mother had scheduled an early morning flight on a Wednesday. The airport is 2 hours away. She said the flight would leave by 7 a.m. at the latest, and she expected to be home by 10 a.m. at the latest. Assuming Camilla had taken the day off, I was under this impression. Camilla booked a hotel near the airport and asked if I wanted to join her. I had that night off. However, I hadn't slept in days, was extremely tired, and had a therapy session the next day at 11 a.m. Traffic around the airport can get heavy around 8, 9 a.m., and I was worried about missing my session, which was part of my probation. Missing it could lead to a contempt of court order. In reality, the flight was leaving at 6 a.m., I wasn't told this, and Camilla would be home by 8 a.m. But under the impression that she was planning to drive through heavy traffic after a 7 a.m. flight and be back by 10 a.m. at the latest, I thought it would be cutting it close. I declined to go with my wife to the hotel. When she asked again, sleep-deprived and annoyed at her constant disregard for my schedule and leaving paraphernalia everywhere, I snapped at her. She left angry, returned the next morning, and still went to work. She didn't take the day off and wouldn't call in sick. That night we talked, and she asked when we were last happy. I told her it was when she spent time with her cousin. The next weekend, she mentioned something inside her broke that night, and she didn't want to pretend anymore. She stated we shouldn't be together, and when I shared how long I'd been unhappy, it broke her heart. I asked if she knew why. She said no, and I explained much of what I wrote here, though not everything. She said she was going to her parents' house for a few days, then packed more things than I thought would fit in her parents' small home. I haven't seen her since. She didn't even personally discuss our situation with my daughter after returning, leaving her devastated. I can't say for sure, but I feel there was more to this. Maybe not, though. Perhaps it was a series of unfortunate coincidences caused by our differing personalities. Still, I can't shake the feeling that there's something else. Well, believe it or not, my wife confided in her friend about her trio party with her cousin and the bouncer I mentioned earlier. It's pretty obvious there was more than just makeup involved. And if that wasn't enough, she got caught red-handed texting her other lover right before she left. I wish I could say this is all just some made-up story, but it's not. I'm beyond furious, and it's consuming my thoughts non-stop. So I'm 38, and my wife and I separated 4 months ago because I found out she cheated on me. It really messed me up because she acted like our 13-year relationship was nothing. She even texted me 2 months ago, saying things shouldn't be abnormal just because we're not together anymore. I'm feeling pretty cynical about people in general now. Lately, I've been getting to know this amazing woman who's really kind and caring. I'm really into her, and she seems genuinely compassionate. I can tell she's interested in dating, but I'm torn. I keep wondering if it would be fair to her to pursue something while I'm still so fresh from my separation. What do you think? It's been 9 months since my wife left me, and some days I'm fine, but others are hard to deal with. She used to be sweet and loving, and we cuddled together on the couch. But now, she's acting like I don't even exist, and it hurts. Even after 9 months, it's challenging to forget those contrasting moments. I wish I could just forget like she has. It's crazy that after 13 years of marriage, she could just act like it was nothing. I'm not really looking for answers, just needed to express myself. Second story. While being in bed with my wife, she called out another man's name. When I asked her about it, she said it was just a friend. When I questioned her about this mystery guy, she insisted he was just a friend. However, something didn't feel right, so I looked into it and discovered she had been messaging him. When I confronted her, she tried to downplay it, claiming it was blown out of proportion. She did admit to drinking and talking to the guy, but said it was deeper than the messages. Apparently, she got upset seeing happy couples at a party we couldn't attend due to my work schedule, knowing I'm working hard to pay our bills and save for our future. According to my wife, she spotted her colleague James smoking and suddenly felt a strong urge to join him. While I don't mind her smoking, it's legal where we live. It's unusual since she's not a smoker. I can't help but wonder why she decided to strike up a conversation with him. She confessed to sharing her frustrations about our closeness with James. Closeness takes a back seat due to my demanding work schedule, and when it happens, it's standard as she's unwell, and I'm not that adventurous. James then asked her to join him upstairs. She got up to go, claiming she didn't intend anything inappropriate but wanted a private chat, then felt dizzy and began to fall. As she narrated her story, I sensed gaps in her tale. She admitted James caught her when she almost fell, but suddenly they were kissing? That didn't sit well with me. According to her, She felt guilty after a few seconds and told him she wasn't comfortable. I raised an eyebrow at her timeline, but she quickly corrected herself, saying it was only a few seconds, not minutes as she initially claimed. I'm unsure if I believe her. She explained feeling uncomfortable staying in the same room with James, so she found the homeowner and asked to lay down in a locked room with the purses. It didn't make sense to me. Why not just leave the party if she felt uncomfortable? She said she didn't want to leave because her friend, who was her ride, wasn't ready to go yet. Instead, she asked the homeowner to arrange someone to pick her up when her friend was leaving. The more she spoke, the more I realized her story had holes. Despite that, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt for now and pressed for more details. Supposedly, that's where the whole thing ended, and anything else this guy is saying is nonsense. Currently waiting for her friend's response to confirm if she was in that room at the end of the night, but I wouldn't put it past her girl power friends to cover for her. I told her I wanted to believe her version of events, and if it was just a kiss, I could forgive it, even though it made me feel sick and betrayed. But something about the story didn't add up, like why she didn't want to report it to her bosses at work to protect her own reputation. I understand, but it still made me suspicious. It's not that I think she's a liar or a cheat, but I need some time to process everything. I didn't even know we had problems in our marriage serious enough for her to confide in a stranger about them. I suggested to her that we go to couples counseling. She already sees a therapist on her own, but I'm not sure what they discuss because she's not very open about it. She told me that she thinks couples counseling could help us, especially since most of her sessions with her current therapist revolve around her nightmares, panic attacks, and fear of passing. It's been almost a year since she started seeing that therapist, and she still wakes up in the middle of the night crying. I let her know that I needed some time to think. It might sound a bit dramatic, but I took a sheet and hung it up in the living room to create a little private space behind it, where I set up my computer. I just need to be alone with my thoughts for a while. I'll give it a day or two to let everything sink in, and then I'll talk to her again after her appointment on Thursday. I don't know how long it'll take me to get over this, but every time I look at her, all I can think of is her vulnerable and wide-eyed in someone else's arms, and it just hurts. My mind's a mess, and I'm considering finding a therapist for myself, someone who can help me cope with the imminent loss of my wife, the love of my life. I'm barricaded in the living room, hiding behind a makeshift sheet barrier with my computer on the couch. It feels a bit like a child playing fort, but this is the only thing that feels right to me at the moment. She attempted to talk to me, to get me to come out from my hiding place, but I just couldn't face her. I need time to process all of this, to sort out my emotions and figure out what to do next. I'm lost, desperate for some guidance. If anyone out there can offer any help, any advice, I would be grateful beyond measure. Around 7 p.m., I left the house and walked aimlessly until I found myself in front of the liquor store. I ended up buying an average-sized bottle of tequila, and before I knew it, I had consumed a significant amount. Drinking isn't my usual go-to, and being slim, I quickly felt the effects of the drinks. By 9 p.m., I stumbled back home and tried to confront her. I was angry and intoxicated, and in a moment of rage, I gave her a gentle shove. Surprisingly, she responded by telling me to do it again, claiming that she wanted me to be mad. So I gave her another push, and she tried to kiss and touch me, leading to us engaging in some acts. The situation was consensual, but I wasn't comfortable with it. I only went along because it had been so long since she showed any interest. About 25 minutes into the act, she said the name James X. I asked her what was going on, and she looked at me and said, "I guess he made me say it so much I forgot." I'm currently secluded in my own little world. Tomorrow, I plan to tell her to leave. I know I'll be all right without her, and she'll be fine without me. I was abruptly awakened at 4 a.m. by a strong smell of marijuana in the apartment. My mind was foggy, but I had a sinking feeling that something was wrong. I stumbled towards the bedroom, hoping against hope that my wife hadn't been foolish enough to bring that man back to our home. However, as I entered the room, I found that most of her things, including her medications, clothes, TV, and computer, were gone. I desperately hoped that she had packed up and left on her own accord, but deep down, I knew that the reality was far from that. I went to the apartment office when it opened and asked to change the locks. She wasn't on the lease, and I wouldn't tolerate her showing up unannounced to cause trouble. The office agreed, and I felt relieved, knowing she couldn't just come in anymore. I texted her, saying she could get her stuff with her brothers or a friend, but that guy wasn't allowed in my apartment. Her response? The laughing so hard you're crying emoji. Typical. I can't deal with her immaturity right now. I headed to the apartment office early to discuss changing the locks. I explained she wasn't on the lease, and I didn't want any trouble if she came back to cause problems. Later, I texted her, telling her to bring her brothers or a friend when picking up her things, but the guy wasn't welcome. Her response was the laughing so hard you're crying emoji. It's like she doesn't grasp the seriousness, making me question if she's taking this seriously at all. Reflecting on last night, I wonder if she's having some kind of breakdown. Everything seemed deliberate. It doesn't make sense to say someone's full name during closeness unless you're weird or trying to make sure your boyfriend knows you said someone else's name, not just a misunderstanding. I called my boss, and surprisingly, he supported my decision, advising me to take some time off to clear my head. He even gave me a few days off, assuring me my job would be waiting when I'm ready to return. It's been months since I've had 2 consecutive days off, let alone 4. Going back to a life that doesn't revolve around her will be a challenge. I'm not even sure if I remember how to have fun anymore, but I'm optimistic about finding my way back to happiness. I've got to say, the fund was a smart move. It's almost entirely my hard-earned cash, maybe even all of it, but I'm not letting that go to waste. If things go smoothly, and she collects her things without a fuss, I plan to give her around $500 as a parting gift. After all, it was meant for her, right? But the rest of that sweet stash is all mine, baby. I might even treat myself to a little getaway using some of my vacation time. Time to leave all this drama behind and live a little. I'm not really worried about her. She's posted some vague messages on social media about how she thought her loved ones would be there for her during tough times. It's already filled with likes, sad emojis, and comments like, "Message me, girl," so she's getting all the support she needs. My mind is still reeling, and I'm trying to process everything that's happened. It may sound a bit over the top, but I'm seriously considering seeking counseling. I feel hurt and violated, and I don't think I can come to terms with it all on my own.